Welcome to week 7 readings. This week's readings start with an understanding of the science class. Now, if there are former science teachers out here, I'm sorry. This is just a reach, but I want to use the idea of potential and kinetic energy as an analogy for the topics of this particular readings. So let's start first with potential energy. Now, use the sign PE. Potential energy can be thought of as the maximum level of ability. Take this guy right here. The circle around him represents his potential energy, the maximum level or capacity that he can operate at. The X's outside represent actions that he cannot do because they're beyond his capacity to do it. Kinetic energy, however, is different, of course. Kinetic energy is the energy due to motion or actions. So it represents everything inside of that circle that he can actually do. So if he were actually to go to his limit, he would be at maximum kinetic and potential energy. So a better way to understand it is simply capacity on the potential side and effort on the kinetic side. Now, we bring all of that together to make some very general statements. Where fiscal capacity suggests maximum limit of spending, fiscal effort suggests a willingness to allocate spending on a particular area. So we're talking about ability or maximum ability and priorities or prioritizing what you wish to spend on. So the question I lead out with, given the last decade or so of school closings, when funding ideas that necessarily aren't given the results, should the squeaky wheel necessarily get the oil? Should we put all of our money in working programs or continue to put money in programs that yield no results? Something to really consider. Is a very provocative question to ask. So let's first look at measuring capacity, or measuring the amount of money available at your disposal, at your expenditure. There are several ways to do it. You can use the GDP, or gross domestic product, which the nation uses to measure its productivity, so that's an expenditure approach. Or you can use a GDI, which is a gross domestic income, or the income approach. Both are usable and applicable to what we're talking about. So with GDP, you're looking at consumption, investments, government expenditures, and then this export minus import, or we call balance of trade. With the income approach, you're looking at wages, interest, rents, and then profits, which means a net foreign profit. Once again, is a type of balance of trade. And that's going to be important in this next example. Why DC, particularly in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, lagged so far behind in education. If you look at DC, my home area, what you see is it is juxtaposed in between two states. The state of Maryland to the north and the state of Virginia to the south. But all of the retail and shopping and malls are located either in Maryland or Virginia and not in DC. So when DC residents spend their money shopping, the sales tax goes to those states. Not to mention that when DC workers, federal government workers, most of them live in Maryland or Virginia, so the property tax actually belongs in those states. So DC doesn't get that. DC could easily have 4 to 5 million people a day inside the city, but at night have 600,000. That's important to consider. So next we'll go to capacity and per capita income as a way to measure it. I want you to consider 3 districts. We have District 1, District 2, and School District 3. And I want you to consider then a per capita income in District 1 is 24,000, in District 2, 16,000, and in District 3, 8,000. That says if we're looking at capacity on per capita income, District 3 cannot compete with Districts 1 and 2. So Let's look at other approaches then to measuring capacity. The first approach you consider, is the tax-based approach. It's probably the most popular or traditional way of looking at funding education, and it looks at general property taxes as a general measure of measuring capacity. Whenever you can't have or don't have a equal amount of property tax, you have to look at a tax-based surrogate, which simply means you're using multiple variables of taxes to resemble property tax. And the last is looking at economic indicators, things like wealth, income, consumption numbers, to actually measure capacity. So the question I want you to think about is, which approach to measuring capacity do you think or do feel is most accurate? I want your opinion on what you think about that. Now let's swing on over to measuring fiscal effort. And looking at fiscal effort or FE equals expenditures, EXP, divided by the tax base or your capacity, we'll call TB. So it's normally expressed as the amount of dollars per $1,000 of capacity. And now that makes sense in a second. So if you have a total capacity, let's say of 200 million, and you have a fiscal effort or FE of $40 per 1,000, then you have a total district effort of 8 million. It's simply using this formula here. Total E equals your tax base divided by 1,000, close parenthesis, times your FE. Now you could change that formula around to then do the following. We have two districts, District A, District B. You know in math, whenever you have two variables of 3, you can find the third. So in District A, you have $750 million, an effort of total effort of 30 million. So you have to figure out what is the FE. You have the numbers over here for District B, and you find the FE for each. But then you ask this question: which district cares the most about education? Feel free to pause also to get to this information. The next question: why would it be inaccurate to compare districts based on total spending on education? And how should a state equalize this?